There's a lot to be said for tradition. Tradition, in part, is tied into history. So when you hear that a guy is an old school trucker, that means, in part, you're talking about history and tradition. Now, you guys know that I like small trucking companies. Well, here's a small trucking company just outside of Pittsburgh that's doing it right. It's family owned, it's got that old school feel to it. Great Lakes Cold Logistics. They're bringing in new trucks. Some of them are automatics and some of them are standards because they've listened to drivers and what drivers want. And some drivers want the automatics. They've got a great health plan and a 401k. So check them out at drivegreatlakes.com. Now, you don't need to be 70 years old to be an old school trucker because old school these days is a mindset and it's a skill set. And you don't have to be old to have that, but you do have to have a few things. Number one, you've got to have pride in your ride. You've got to keep the truck clean, you've got to keep it mechanically sound, and you've got to drive it smoothly. And number two is you have to have pride in the job that you do. Drive like a professional, dress like a professional, and act like a professional. That means no flip-flops and no CB Rambo trash talk, and it means when you get behind the wheel, the first thing you've got to think about every time is safety. Your safety and the safety of others on the road. Now, why even talk about this? Why even talk about old school trucking? Because there's value in it, and there are lessons to be learned. These days, in the days of the modern mega carriers, they've tried to take the trucking lifestyle, our lifestyle, and turn it into a low-paid, subservient lifestyle. And there's a lot more to trucking than that, and there's a lot more to life than that. Old school trucking means both the trucker and the carrier make money. Not like these days when in a lot of cases it's the carrier and the shareholder that are the only ones making the money. Something else old school that predates this modern trucking era that we're in are these engineers that are coming up with driving technology that think that they can drive the trucks better than we can. And that's hooey. And all that truly is engineers and snake salesmen selling baubles to desk jockeys, and we all know we can drive the trucks better than the computers. It's just software engineers trying to get rich. That's all it is. Old school trucking refers to what ties truckers to our roots, like mechanical engines, classic trucks, and truck shows like Twin Sticks and Toothpicks, and the camaraderie of drivers. We had no e-logs and no logbooks, or in some cases multiple logbooks. We had cab-overs, long hood trucks, and polished chrome, and parking lots full of tricked out trucks because truckers could afford the extra bling back then because diesel fuel and the costs were not so outrageous. We had no DEF, we had very few rules and regulations. We had Montford trucks in the left-hand lane, big CB radios, and hot truck stop home-cooked meals for $10. With the phones at the booths in the truck stops and priority seating and service for professional drivers. Old school is mindset. Old school is a skill set. Old school is about our trucking history. So don't lose any sleep over the fact that we've got rules and regulations coming out the wazoo, that we've got unskilled drivers on the road, that we've got road rage issues and driver trainers with 3 months experience, and focus on the fact that as a professional driver, as a career driver, you want to be the best you can be and you want to be well paid for it. The best drivers out there are the old school drivers, young or old. It's just the mindset, so step up and join the team. I've got an old school truck driver story for you while I think of it. Back in the 70s, I was driving a company truck for a small fleet out west, and the guy that owned the company was an old school truck driver. He decided he was going to retire and the son was going to take over. The son had never driven a truck in his life. He was a college boy, but he decided he was going to fix things at this trucking company where truly nothing was wrong. So the first thing he did was bring in some new trucks and had the fuel pumps all set at the factory and sealed because he was after better fuel mileage. That was one of his premier goals. So we all got out there with these these brand new trucks, and they were the first of the big cam series Cummins. And we all realized all of a sudden that these trucks were weaker than the trucks that we'd had before. So we started popping the hoods to find out why, and we found out that the pumps were sealed right from the factory, turned down and sealed right from the factory. So of course, we got into the pumps and turned them back up so they'd pull again. And the owner found out that he wasn't getting any better fuel mileage, and he decided to investigate, and he pulled a few of the hoods of the trucks, had the mechanics check it, and found out that we were into the fuel pumps. So we all got hauled into a driver's meeting, and we were told in no circumstances were we to touch those motors again. We could check the oil, we could check the rad, we could check the belts, but we were not to touch the motors. Fine. So off we go, and my old mentor Simon gets a few hundred miles out from home, breaks down. And Simon was one of these guys that could rebuild an engine with toothpicks and hair clips. So when he phoned in, they thought, oh, what's happened now? So Simon sat in the truck stop, and they sent the head mechanic, the shop foreman really, all the way out a few hundred miles to where Simon's truck was. And the truck was only a few months old at the time. He pulls the hood, the shop foreman pulls the hood, looks around, checks the fuel filter, just a plugged fuel filter. And that was pretty common in those days because the fuel really wasn't up to snuff. So that's all it took, was to swap the fuel filter out, something we were all perfectly capable of back then, but we'd been told not to touch the motors. So the shop foreman realizes he's been had, because Simon certainly knew what was wrong with the truck. He wouldn't fix it himself, he waited for the service truck. So he says to Simon, after he swaps the fuel filters around, he says to Simon, okay, you've got me, you've made your point. Come on inside to the truck stop, I'll buy you a coffee. Simon says, buddy, I've been held up here for hours. I gotta go. Gets into the truck and takes off, leaves the shop foreman standing there with his jaw hanging on the ground. And I think of that every time I think of old school. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, work on that old school mentality. It is just a mindset. And we'll see you on the back haul.